It wasn't what she said. It was the way she leaned in, like she already knew I wasn't leaving yet. I didn't walk into that night expecting anything to change. It felt ordinary at first, the kind of evening you step into without thinking you'll remember it later. The air was calm, the noise around us low and distant, like the world had agreed to stay out of the way for a while. She was already there when I noticed her. Not in a dramatic way. Not the kind of entrance that turns heads. She carried herself with an ease that didn't need attention. Early 40s, confident, graceful. Someone who knew who she was and didn't rush to explain herself. When she smiled, it wasn't loud, settled, and somehow that made it harder to look away. We started talking the way people do when there's no pressure, about small things, safe things. Work, the city, stories that didn't mean much on their own. But she listened differently. When I spoke, she didn't wait for her turn. She stayed with my words, eyes steady, head slightly tilted, like she was actually curious where I was going with them. I became aware of my own voice, how it slowed, how I chose my words more carefully. There was warmth between us, subtle but constant, the kind that doesn't announce itself. It just exists. We sat close enough that our shoulders almost touched. Almost. That space between us felt deliberate, like something we were both aware of but neither wanted to name yet. Every time I shifted, I wondered if I was moving closer or giving her room. She laughed at something I said, and for a moment her hand brushed mine. Not a grab, not even a pause, just a soft, passing contact. But it stayed with me longer than it should have. I felt it in my chest, like my body noticed before my mind did. I caught myself studying the details. The way she crossed her legs slowly, the calm confidence in her posture, the softness that appeared in her eyes when she spoke about things she cared about. She had stories behind her silence. You could feel it. And then there was the way she looked at me, not assessing, not amused, just present. That was the part that unsettled me the most. I'd been seen before, but this felt different, quieter. Like she wasn't trying to figure me out. She was just letting me be there with her. The night had grown late, but neither of us seemed ready to leave. Not yet. The world outside continued on its rhythm, oblivious to the quiet transformation happening in the small corner where we existed, just the two of us. She leaned in again, closer than before, but not pressing. Just close enough that the warmth of her presence brushed against me like a promise. I could feel it in my chest. The subtle thrum of anticipation mixed with comfort. "You're not in a hurry to leave either," she observed softly, a knowing smile touching her lips. "No," I admitted, keeping my voice steady, though my heart felt like it was running ahead of me. Not when this feels like it matters." She studied me for a long moment, the kind of look that sees more than just your face, your intentions, your hesitation, your honesty. Then, slowly, she reached out, resting her hand lightly on mine. Her fingers didn't entwine with mine, but the contact lingered, warm and grounding. A gesture that said more than words could. "I see you. I'm here. This matters to me too." We talked quietly after that. Not about confessions or decisions, just about small things. Life, the unexpected beauty of an ordinary evening. The way time seemed to slow when two people were willing to truly notice each other. There was laughter, soft and unhurried, the kind that felt effortless because it had room to breathe. Every now and then, our hands brushed again, sometimes deliberate, sometimes accidental, each touch echoing the truth neither of us needed to speak aloud. The attraction, the pull we'd both been aware of since the beginning, was still there, steady and patient, like a tide that didn't need to crash to prove its presence. And yet, neither of us tried to define it fully. That moment of clarity, the honesty of the previous hours, had been enough. It was a shared understanding that this connection wasn't about rushing into a label or forcing a path. It was about being fully present, fully acknowledged, and fully accepted in a way neither of us had expected. She leaned her head slightly toward mine, a quiet intimacy, and I felt the warmth of it settle deep into me. For a moment, nothing else existed. Not the age difference, not the world outside, not the questions about what might come next. Just this, two people together, letting the night carry them gently. Eventually, the time came to leave. We stood slowly, the movement unhurried, as if the night itself had given us permission to linger in our own pace. Outside, the cool air greeted us, and the world seemed sharper, louder, and yet somehow less urgent than before. "I don't know what tomorrow will bring," she said softly, eyes searching mine. "But I know tonight was real." I nodded. "That's enough for me." We parted with a final glance, lingering just long enough to acknowledge everything that had shifted between us. There was no promise, no expectation, only the shared certainty that this night had mattered, and that our connection would carry forward, however slowly, however uncertainly. Walking away, I realized that some nights don't end early. Not because of time, but because of the way someone makes you feel truly seen. And the memory of her leaning in would linger with me long after the night had passed, gentle and unhurried, just like her. I told myself not to read into it, that this was just comfort, just coincidence, just a pleasant conversation on an unremarkable night. But something in me knew better, because as the minutes passed, the night didn't move forward the way it usually did. It slowed, deepened, and without either of us saying it out loud, I realized we weren't just passing time anymore. We were settling into something. Expand Keynote 1, 500 words. There was a moment when the conversation stopped needing words. I didn't notice it right away. It happened slowly, the way important things often do. Her voice softened, dropping just enough that I had to lean in slightly to hear her. Or maybe I was already leaning in, and only realized it afterward. She shifted closer. Not abruptly. Not with intention that demanded attention. Just a gentle movement, as if the space between us had finally become unnecessary. That was when she leaned in. Not close enough to touch, just close enough to change everything. Her shoulder brushed mine, barely there, but enough that I could feel the warmth through the fabric. The scent of her perfume, something subtle, familiar now, settled between us. I became acutely aware of how still she was, how calm, like this closeness wasn't an accident. Her eyes held mine, steady and unguarded. No testing, no teasing, just presence. The world narrowed. I could hear her breathing then, slow and even. I noticed how she tilted her head slightly when she listened, the small pause before she spoke again. Every movement felt deliberate, not calculated, like she was simply allowing what was already there to exist. She said my name, quietly, not to get my attention. She already had it. She said it the way people do when they want to be understood. My chest tightened. I felt something shift. Not urgency, not desire in the way I'd known it before. This was softer, heavier, a recognition. I wondered if she felt it too. And then I realized she did, because she didn't pull back. There was a silence between us that stretched without breaking. Not awkward, not empty, carried weight, filled with things we weren't ready to say yet. I thought about the line we were standing on, about how easy it would be to step over it, and how much more meaningful it felt to stay right where we were. I searched her face for hesitation. There wasn't any, but there was awareness. She knew what this moment could become, and instead of rushing it, she let it breathe. Her hand rested closer to mine now, not touching, but close enough that the possibility lingered. My fingers twitched once before I stilled them. I didn't want to misread her. At the same time, I didn't want to pretend this was nothing. Our eyes met again, and something unspoken passed between us. Acknowledgement without expectation. Attraction without demand. Her lips curved into a small smile. Not playful. Not inviting. Just honest. The kind of smile that says, I feel this too. That was when I understood. This night wasn't drifting forward anymore. It was settling in. And the way she leaned in told me something I hadn't allowed myself to think yet. Whatever this was, it wasn't ending early. After that moment of closeness, something in her shifted. Not away from me, but inward. She leaned back just enough to breathe, her gaze drifting for a second before returning to mine. When she spoke again, her voice carried a different weight. Softer, slower, like she was choosing honesty over ease. It's strange, she said almost to herself, How you can be surrounded by people and still feel unseen. I didn't interrupt. I didn't need to. Her words weren't asking for answers, they were asking for space. She told me about learning to stand on her own. About years spent being strong because there was no other option. She spoke of confidence like something she'd earned, not something she'd always had. And in the way her hands folded together, then slowly relaxed, I saw the vulnerability she didn't announce. There was a pause. Her eyes met mine again, searching not for reassurance but understanding. "I don't talk about this much," she admitted. I felt the trust in that sentence. The risk. I told her the truth in return. About feeling like I was still being measured by my age instead of my intentions. About wanting to be taken seriously, not just someday but now. I spoke carefully, not to impress her, but to be honest. She listened the same way she had all night. Fully. At one point, she reached out, her fingers brushing my sleeve before settling at my collar. She straightened it gently, a small, intimate gesture that felt more caring than bold. Her touch was warm, steady, not asking for anything, just present. "I don't see you the way you think people do," she said quietly. That landed deeper than she probably realized. The room felt closer then, not physically but emotionally, like the air between us had thickened with truth. I could feel the conflict rising beneath it, the awareness of how this might look to the outside world, how easy it would be for someone to misunderstand what was happening here. But in that moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was how honest she was being, how she didn't hide behind humor or confidence, how she let me see the part of her that had learned to be careful. She exhaled slowly, as if releasing something she'd been holding on to for a long time. "I don't want to confuse you," she said. I shook my head. "You're not." And I meant it, because confusion comes from mixed signals. This wasn't that. This was clarity layered with caution. Our eyes stayed locked, neither of us looking away. The attraction was there, undeniable, but so was respect. Restraint. The quiet understanding that this mattered too much to rush. She smiled then, not fully, just enough. And I realized the risk wasn't in saying too much. It was in pretending this didn't matter at all. After everything we'd shared, the night didn't rush forward the way it easily could have. Instead, it paused. She leaned back slightly, just enough to create space between us. Not distance, but room. The kind of space that asks a question without saying it out loud. Her eyes stayed on mine as she did, watching carefully, not to pull away, but to see what I would do with the moment she'd given back to me. I didn't move closer, not because I didn't want to, but because I understood what she was offering. Choice. The room felt different with that space in place. Quieter. The kind of quiet that presses in on you, asking you to be honest. I became aware of the ticking of time again, the soft background noise returning in fragments. A reminder that the world still existed outside of us. She took a slow breath, her shoulders easing as she settled back into her chair. One hand wrapped loosely around her cup, the other resting open in her lap. Relaxed, unprotected. She wasn't closing herself off. She was grounding herself. I met her gaze steady. "This feels important," I said, choosing my words with care. She nodded. Not quickly, not dramatically, just enough to let me know she felt it too. "It does," she agreed. "And that's why I don't want to rush it." There was relief in her voice, and something else, respect. For herself. For me. We sat like that for a while, letting the moment settle instead of pushing it forward. I noticed how comfortable she was in stillness, how she didn't fidget or reach for distraction. She had learned how to let silence speak. I followed her lead. Our knees brushed once when she shifted, accidental but undeniable. She didn't pull away. Neither did I. The contact stayed gentle, grounding. It wasn't electricity. It was weight, presence. I thought about how easy it would be to mistake intensity for intimacy. How many times I'd done that before. But this felt different. Slower. More deliberate. More real. She smiled faintly, eyes soft, as if she'd arrived at the same realization. "I like this pace," she said quietly. So did I. The night stretched on, no longer moving in minutes but in moments. We refilled our cups. The music dipped lower. The lights softened. Nothing changed, and yet everything had. I felt calm, grounded, not pulled forward by want, but held in place by mutual understanding. This wasn't hesitation. It was intention. When our hands finally touched again, it wasn't accidental. Her fingers brushed mine, then rested there, light, warm, unclaimed. I turned my hands slightly, not gripping, just acknowledging her touch. She looked at me then, really looked at me as if memorizing the way this felt. The pause didn't weaken the connection. It strengthened it. Because in choosing not to rush, we were choosing each other carefully. By the time the night reached that point, the tension between us wasn't sharp anymore. It was steady, the kind that settles deep in your chest and stays there, asking not for action, but for truth. I felt it in the way my thoughts slowed, in the way my body felt grounded instead of restless. Whatever this was, it had already changed the rhythm of the night. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized how calm she seemed. Not guarded, not unsure, just present, waiting without pressure. So I spoke. "I don't want to misread this," I said quietly, "but this night feels different to me." I didn't rush the words. I didn't soften them to protect myself. I let them land as they were. She didn't interrupt. She didn't look away. Instead, she nodded once, slowly, as if confirming something she'd already been holding inside. "It feels different to me too," she said. "I just didn't want to be the one to say it first." That admission carried more weight than a confession ever could. I felt the tension release just enough to breathe. Not because the feeling was gone, but because it was finally named. I wasn't sure if it was just me, I admitted, or if I was imagining something that wasn't there. Her smile was gentle, reassuring, not triumphant. "You're not imagining it," she said. But I needed to know it wasn't about impulse. I understood then what she'd been careful about all night. Not fear, but respect. For the moment. For me. For herself. She stood, slowly, and I followed. The movement brought us closer without intention, like gravity doing what it always does. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she stepped into me. Not quickly, not dramatically, and wrapped her arms around my shoulders. The hug was warm, unhurried, grounding. I rested my hands lightly at her back, careful, present. I felt the rise and fall of her breath, the quiet strength in the way she held me. It wasn't a moment of need, it was acknowledgement. When she pulled back, she didn't go far. Just enough to look at me. She lifted one hand and rested it against my cheek, her thumb brushing once. Soft, deliberate. "I'm glad you said something," she whispered. Before I could respond, she leaned in and pressed a gentle kiss to my cheek. Nothing rushed, nothing claimed, just a quiet punctuation to everything we'd shared. I felt warmth spread through my chest. Not urgency, not hunger, something steadier, something lasting. We stayed like that for a moment, close, breathing in sync, letting the truth settle where it belonged. There was no promise made, no future mapped out, but there was clarity, and somehow that felt like more than enough.